Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. This lodge meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on the elementals, and next week's topic will be what is the atom. We also meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. United Lodge of Theosophists is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. This chapter is titled Devotion by Means of Separation from the Three Qualities. Krishna, I will explain further the sublime spiritual knowledge, superior to all others, by knowing which all the sages have attained to supreme perfection on the dissolution of this body. They take sanctuary in this wisdom, and having attained to my state, they are not born again, even at the new evolution, nor are they disturbed at the time of general destruction. The great Brahma is my womb, in which I place the seed. From that, O son of Bharata, is the production of all existing things. This great Brahma is the womb for all those various forms which are produced from any womb, and I am the Father who provideth the seed. The three great qualities called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, light or truth, passion or desire, and indifference or darkness, are born from nature, and bind the imperishable soul to the body, O thou of mighty arms. Of these, the sattva quality, by reason of its lucidity and peacefulness, entwineth the soul to rebirth through attachment to knowledge and that which is pleasant. Know that Rajas is of the nature of desire, producing thirst and propensity. It, O son of Kunti, imprisoneth the ego through the consequences produced from action. The quality of tamas, the offspring of the indifference in nature, is the deluder of all creatures, O son of Bharata. It imprisoneth the ego in a body through heedless folly, sleep, and idleness. The sattva quality attaches the soul through happiness and pleasure, the rajas through action, and tamas quality, surrounding the power of judgment with indifference, attaches the soul through heedlessness. When, O son of Bharata, the qualities of tamas and rajas are overcome, then that of sattva prevaileth. Tamas is chiefly acting when sattva and rajas are hidden. And when the sattva and tamas diminish, then rajas prevaileth. When wisdom, the bright light, shall become evident at every gate of the body, then one may know that sattva quality is prevalent within. The love of gain, activity in action, and the initiating of works restlessness, and inordinate desire are produced when the quality of rajas is prevalent, whilst the tokens of the predominance of the tamas quality are absence of illumination, the presence of idleness, heedlessness, and delusion, O son of Kunti. If the body is dissolved when the sattva quality prevails, the self within proceeds to the spotless spheres of those who are acquainted with the highest place. When the body is dissolved while the quality of rajas is predominant, the soul is born again in a body attached to action. And so also of one who dies while tamas quality is prevalent, the soul is born again in the wombs of those who are deluded. The fruit of righteous acts is called pure and holy, appertaining to sattva. From rajas is gathered fruit in pain, and the tamas produceth only senselessness, ignorance, and indifference. From sattva, wisdom is produced. From rajas, desire. From tamas, ignorance, delusion, and folly. Those in whom the sattva quality is established mount on high. Those who are full of rajas remain in the middle sphere, the world of men, while those who are overborne by the gloomy quality tamas sink below. But when the wise man perceiveth that the only agents of action are these qualities, and comprehends that which is superior to these qualities, he attains to my state. And when the embodied self surpasseth these three qualities of goodness, action, and indifference, which are coexistent with the body, it is released from rebirth and death, old age and pain, and drinketh of the water of immortality. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. This is not very good. Elementals. Why should we talk about elementals? We need to understand that we're not separate or different from elementals, because that's what we are made up of. Elementals are us. We'll read from the Secret Doctrine and then discuss what they are and why are they that important to us. Secret Doctrine 1, page 221. We're here discussing the different groups or hierarchies that contribute to men. And the sixth and seventh groups partake of the lower qualities of the quaternary. They're conscious, ethereal entities, as invisible as ether, which are shot out like the boughs of a tree from the first central group of the four, and shoot out in their turn numberless side groups, the lower of which are the nature spirits or elementals of countless kinds and varieties. From the formless and unsubstantial, the ideal thoughts of their creators, down to the atomic, though to human perception, invisible organisms. So this is a very condensed view of the elementals in the Secret Doctrine. There's an HPV article called Elementals in 3 sections, comprising all the invisible world and how they're peopled, in other words. She spells ether, this is a cojoined AE, like this in the Secret Doctrine, to give the differentiation that this is not the ether of science. So what does it mean? It means the astral, ethereal realm. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So it's not the ether of the scientific world. And at the beginning of her article, this is what she says. The universal ether, or the astral light, was not, in the eyes of the ancients, simply a tenantless something, stretching throughout the expanse of heaven. It was for them a boundless ocean, peopled like our familiar earthly seas, with gods, planetary spirits, monstrous and minor creatures, and having in its every molecule the germs of life, from the potential up to the most developed. So, these elementals then occupy a space. They're ethereal, so they're not visible. They're invisible. Invisible. And then she quotes from Zanoni, Bulwer-Lytton's works, and this is a description given, and I will read a little bit of it for you. Obviously, Bulwer-Lytton knew a lot more than he's giving the indication here. In Zanoni, the wise Mejnour says to Glyndon, "Man is arrogant in proportion to his ignorance. For several ages he saw in the countless worlds that sparkle through space like the bubbles of a shoreless ocean only the petty candles that Providence has been pleased to light for no other purpose but to make the night more agreeable to men. Astronomy has corrected this delusion for human vanity. Everywhere in this immense design, science brings new life to light. Reasoning then, by evident analogy, if not a leaf, if not a drop of water, but is no less than yonder star, a habitable and breathing world, nay, if even man himself is a world to other lives, and millions and myriads dwell in the rivers of his blood, and inhabit man's frame as man inhabits earth, common sense would suffice to teach that the circumfluent infinite, which you call space, the boundless impalpable which divides earth from the moon and the stars, is filled also with its correspondent and appropriate life. Is it not a visible absurdity to suppose that being is crowded upon every leaf and yet absent from the immensities of space? The microscope shows you the creatures on the leaf. No mechanical tube is yet invented to discover the nobler and more gifted things that hover in the illimitable air. Yet between these last and men is a mysterious and terrible affinity. But first, he tells us, to penetrate this barrier from earth to the astral, the soul with which you listen must be sharpened by intense enthusiasm, purified from all earthly desires. When thus prepared, science can be brought to aid it. The sight itself may be rendered more subtle, the nerves more acute, the spirit more alive and outward, and the element itself, the air, the space, may be made by certain secrets of the higher chemistry more palpable and clear. And this too is not magic, as the credulous call it, as I have so often said. Magic, a science that violates nature, exists not. It is but the science by which nature can be controlled. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, in space, there are millions of beings. Not literally spiritual, for they have all like the animalculae, unseen by the naked eye, certain forms of matter, no matter so delicate, air-drawn and subtle, yet it is, as it were, but a film, a gossamer, that clothes the spirit. Yet in truth these races differ most widely, some of surpassing wisdom, some of horrible malignity, some hostile as fiends to men, others gentle as messengers between earth and heaven. So obviously Bulwer Lytton knew what he was talking about. Now, going back to HPB's article, she gives us some names to relate these diminutive beings generally. She says in the olden days they were called daemons, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And so daemons and elemental spirits are the same in her writing. And we just read a whole bunch of classes. And she says, if we go to the old writings, their very names indicate their professions to us, because they're not all the same. They don't do the same thing. How many are there in nature's spirits? 4. What are they? Well, fire. These are listed in the Secret Doctrine. Air, water, earth. So obviously they occupy all these regions, but because they're ethereal, they're not visible to the eye. She tells us Madan, a general term, I'll put it up here, is a wicked elemental spirit. They're half brutes, half monsters. Their looks are like a cow, and they're the friend of malicious sorcerers, and help bring about their evil purposes into activity by revenge and striking men and cattle with sudden death, illness, and so forth. So we see that their professions are not the same. This one is malignant. Then she talks about Shudala Madan, which is found around the graveyards. These are called ghouls in our dictionaries. And they delight where crime and murders are committed, or places of execution. But their work is juggling. So Shudala, I'll put them large so it can be read. Shudala Madan is a juggler by profession. And helps with all fire phenomena. So where does it live? One of the elements of earth, fire. Kuti Shatan is called the little juggling imps. So a subsection to it. Shudala is half fire, half water demon. Assumes any shape it wants and makes people see that it does not really exist. Shula Madan is a mischievous usbuk. It's the furnace demon, skilled in pottery and baking, and it likes to be flattered and keeps underground. So where would we find it? Underground. Earth. It belongs to earth. And Kumil Madan is Undine proper. What's Undine? Water. What are the earth ones called? Gnomes. Fire, salamanders. And air, sylphs. I'll spell it in a minute. This way? Perhaps, I don't know. Sylphs. Sometimes the spelling doesn't come. And then she says the most and the strongest is called Poruthumadan, is the wrestling demon that helps the performer by holding them up above the soil, and it assumes that position for levitation, and also it helps in taming wild animals. So she tells us every physical manifestation has its own class of elemental spirits to superintend it. Now, if you go to the literatures of the Hindus, they talk about Pisakas, which are demons or races of gnomes and giants. And then there's another class called Gandharvas. These are good demons, celestial seraphs, and they're singers. And Asuras and Nagas are the titanic spirits. I don't know which part I should take off. We go up here. Leave that there. I'll just put the names up here. Pisakas, gnomes, Gandharvas, these are the good demons, celestial seraphs, and Asuras and Nagas. Okay. Now, how do they affect us? Since they exist in fire, water, air, and earth, that means that they're there. These are elementals, comparison with the cosmic gods, and subjected to all and everything that happens on earth. They are the soul of the elements, the capricious forces in nature, acting under one immutable law, inherent in these centers of force, with undeveloped consciousness and bodies of plastic mold, which can be shaped according to the conscious or unconscious will of the human being. These beings have never been, but will, in myriads of ages hence, be evolved into men. They belong to the three lower kingdoms and pertain to the mysteries on account of their dangerous nature. So we're not recommended to get in touch with them. So what exactly is that saying? We just read in the Gita that there are three attributes of nature. We call them gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And let us see how that is appropriate. The elementals are, so to say, the tools we use to build our house of life. They are the fabric of our sensations, the form of our desires, the vitality of our thoughts, and of our aspirations. Desire attracts the elementals. Thought directs them, and knowledge controls them. This is the process meaning of the aphorism, behind will stands desire. So then, we human beings attract these centers of energy, and what do? We impress them. They are not conscious entities. They don't have any will, but they are suited to one part of our earth, and they work ceaselessly in their own realms. In other words, a fire elemental works with fire, the water with water, the sylphs with air, and the gnomes with earth. So when we attract them with our thought, our speech, and our action, we're impressing them with that thought excuse me, and giving them a character. They're hidden from our ordinary vision, but we can get to see them. With that process we described earlier, we can make our meditative processes so refined, so concentrated, that that field becomes observable to the inner eye. There is an article by Mr. Judge called The Hidden Treasure, and in it it specifies that elementals can hide gems and precious metals from being viewed. In other words, they're protecting that treasure for the right time when it should become visible. And many articles at that 19th century outpouring of the wisdom at that age shows that the South American continent especially is full of these precious metals, including gold, but it is underground and it is sealed because it needs to come to be visible when that nation is ready to assume responsibility for it. We're not talking about a little gold, we're talking about a lot of gold. In other words, it needs to be distributed evenly and equally to all who's going to benefit from it. So it's waiting for its time to become visible. South American continent, Peru, Bolivia, those areas are what we're talking about. Chile, all those areas. But the significance of this article is that the only thing elementals are hiding from view for human beings. If they have this capacity to hide, is that the only thing they're hiding? Not so. Why? Because we ourselves have situated these elementals in strategic positions in our makeup. So they're hiding other things from us as well. Because we, from incarnation to incarnation, follow on the same path. So the seeing then has to be cultivated. So let us see what it says. It says, by analogy, we can go to the psychic plane and see what it is that is being hidden from us. Amongst these treasures, hidden from the many, are sympathy, generosity, kindliness, appreciation, all of the altruistic qualities in us. In other words, man, through ignorance and by means of selfish desires, has amassed the elementals of separateness, avarice, cruelty, haughtiness. And with these materials, he has unconsciously built a wall separating himself from his fellows. Within this wall, then, hidden and inert, lie the gems of his common human feelings. He is a man and sealed, but not ensouled. And he fancies his wall impregnable. He built his wall with his own hands. But it is not so. The edifice, which the personal man thought to secure, will crack under shocks of sorrow, suffering, and illusion, and the man will then catch a glimpse of the forgotten treasure. The inner man then makes it come to the forefront. Desire for easement of his pain helps him attract help from elementals to broaden the cracks in the wall, to permit the entrance of thoughts that can direct its raising, piece by piece, section by section. In other words, we're going to get rid of it by raising it. This is the process of cleansing the mind. We talk about meditation. Here is the key to cleansing the mind, of clearing up kama manas being the most active at this stage of development for most humanity. Kama manas. This is the clearing up of it. It is the dispersal of certain elementals that have been amassed at the strategic points in the personal nature. What is our personal nature? We have the physical body, we have an astral body, we have the jiva that sustains it, and above that we have kama manas, which then should be looking up to the divine manas, the higher aspect of itself, because it's only as a reflection of the higher, but it doesn't. Because of our personal desire, we're constantly pulling it down, we're not allowing it to get a glimpse of the other, the higher. Wrong desire attracted them. Wrong thought directed them. Wrong action made a matrix of them. Right motivation disperses them. So we have to have the right motivation to uproot these elementals that we have placed in these strategic positions. What about the treasures of the mind? Fairness, honest consideration of every idea on its own merits, conscientious evaluation, suspended judgment, and the like. What about these? No wall is so nearly impregnable as that of a mind encased in prejudice, preconception, and prejudgment. This wall, built up by pride, self-satisfaction, and suspicion of others, is truly impervious to attacks from without. Effective onslaught must come from within. So we have work to do in order to get rid of the elementals that we don't want. How are we to proceed? How are we going to do it? The process here described is occult magic. The very thoughts that help in uncovering the psychic treasures have a sort of effect in the spiritual alchemy, because it attracts better desires to turn the higher level of thought to come into being, necessary for that effort to take place, which is a constructive effort. Now, we hear this sentence over and over again in theosophical writings: self-induced and self-devised efforts. But here is why. It says, now, self-induced and self-devised efforts bring into potency the previously hidden powers of the mind. No other can activate that aspect of the higher mind. It requires self-induced and self-devised method. Man, now realizing his identity with all humanity, consciously attacks the final fortification. He strives to discover the supreme treasure, the real man, the God within. So this is what is hidden from view. What is this? Light energy. We're light energy. We come from a light center, spiritual light, but nevertheless it is light, and we don't see it because it is hidden from view elementals, we have a strategically placed camouflages this inner light. We can't see it. Thus, level after level of thought, a step after a step in realization lie behind and ahead of the warrior who would successfully assail the fortifications of the personal nature. We built it up. It's not reality, it's illusion, but nevertheless, we live on earth. We have a temple, which is our physical body. We have a psychic nature and a mental nature and an astral body. All these are made up of elementals. These four find their expression in man. The elementals express only one. Each elemental expresses one of these: fire, water, air, and earth. But in man, all of these find expression because we're the highest evolutionary achievement on earth. We're the microcosm of the macro, and we express all of this in our being. There comes to this man who undertakes this fight, which is motivated by the desire for identification with the self of all, the realization that within his compound being, here and now, today, this moment, there is a center in which this real man dwells. It isn't outside of us, it's inside. It's not anywhere else, but it is the real man. This is the only thing we really are. All the rest is just the lower quaternary, which falls off at the end of each life cycle. His work in terms of processes within the psychophysiological structure is to build a neural pathway to that center. And Mr. Judge's article puts it in these terms. He says, to assume the position of the real man is to so change the mind's polarity that it permits the emergence of the God instead of the intrusion of the elementals. I love Mr. Judge. He really knows how to put it. We'll read it again. To assume the position of the real man is to so change the mind's polarity that it permits the emergence of the God instead of the intrusion of the elementals. So, what causes this disparity in our meditation process? Elementals themselves. How do we get rid of them? Well, as we sit day after day in meditation, trying to visualize the real inner light, the polarity of mind is slowly changing. So it's the alchemical process in the body that activates and changes everything. As long as the intention or the motive is to serve humanity, not ourselves. It has to be based on altruism. It has to be based on the one life. That we are one life, not many, one. The oversoul is one. Every human being is in it. Every human being partakes of the light. Every human being is, in other words, every human being has affinity to the root it has come from. It's always there. It's just we don't see it. The only way then is to find the ray and follow it. So it says, the man's work even then is not done. If we were to find the center, our work is not done. We found it, we know it is. I am means just that. I am that I am. I am the center. Now his eyes are open and he knows that the wall constructed to protect humanity from the hordes of vandal elementals, which is attracted by folly, is still there. Into that structure that was built eons and eons ago by the masters of wisdom and all those beneficent forces of nature for men, is built brick by brick by renunciation. And then, so this man who has achieved this selflessness also lays his bricks into that wall with selfless devotion, and he cements them into place. Thus he adds and reinforces that guardian wall, and which is continuously sustained as a protection for all humanity. So once we find that, then there is other realms we have to conquer in selflessness in service to humanity. Now, oh, well, I've run out of time. I'm afraid this is the end of it. So I will we'll open it and answer questions, and some other aspects of the philosophy will come forth. Yeah.
I've heard of ceremonies, spiritual ceremonies of sorts where representations of the elements are utilized. Let's say a candle to represent fire, a glass of water to represent water, let's say a stone to represent earth, and maybe a feather or something else allegoric to air. And these are utilized, and the people before initiating these ceremonies, they invoke by name the spirit of the elements that you were mentioning: salamanders, sylphs,
gnomes, undines.
Undines, yes. Is that something recommended to some extent in, let's say, by Theosophy, or for, is that, let's say, I don't know, for the environment of where the person would be, or the ceremony that would take place, or for whatever purpose?
What is the ceremony in honor of? What are we doing the ceremony?
Intention. What's the
intention? It could be meditate. I've witnessed people like even before a talk, or different kind of ceremony, different kind of. It's like a somewhat of a invocation of sorts.
Okay.
Just curious.
This philosophy, as far as this student knows, does not recommend any such, because these are the lower aspects of us. Remember what we said? This is the quaternary we're talking about. That's not who we're trying to get in touch with. We're trying to get in touch with the higher self, not the elemental energies. We're trying to change our polarity towards the one center, one life. Here, we'll put this here.
The source.
One life. And we can represent it this way. And here are the rays that shine through, and say each one we consider a soul. Right? A soul. Now, elementals, this part represents your higher trier. This is a spirit. I'm not sure anybody can read this. Atma. Atma is a spirit. Buddhi is your soul, a spiritual soul. I'll put an S for a spiritual soul. And this is manas, which is the mind. This is the higher triad, right? This is the permanent of you that goes from life to life. This is what is camouflaged. What camouflages it? Here's the quaternary. This is up here, but I'm putting it down there so I can write on it, right? These are the elementals, elemental lives that we're talking about, that occupy all of your nature. You have a body, astral body. You have life, which is jiva. And then you have what? Kama, passions and desires. And in this stage of development, manas, kama manas is expressed because it pulls the lower mind, the intellectual mind, down this way. These are the elementals that we have placed in these strategic positions. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to displace them with the ones that will not prevent us going that way to the higher aspect of you. So I do not know how any ceremony to these diminutive lives be beneficent. This student is not aware of any. So I can't go to those places that you are trying to guide me to. I don't know if it would be beneficent or not. Nowhere have I seen that we should augment this part of our nature. Yes, you have a question.
Yeah, my reaction to you is based on this student's understanding. It's those ceremonies are trying to raise the person from lower to higher, but Theosophy teaches the student to bring the higher to lower, and the emphasis is not so much on outward ceremonies and acts. It's more about living the life instead of getting caught in the outward distractions of ceremony, and even elementals are distractions. So it's more about the philosophy and the way you think is more important based on the student's understanding. So
yeah, thank you. So
well put. I would like to add to we want to assume the position of the higher and not emphasize the lower.
And the other point is, even with meditation, this student read, meditation is not so much talked about because the life itself is the meditation, so even meditation does not have the emphasis in that way. So any outward act, the way you should do this, that, it's less emphasized, and more the attention is to altruism and day-to-day life, how you can make an impact in that way.
So in this philosophy then, what is going to happen is that the thief is going to be taken to heaven. You have all heard that, right? Dupree used to say that all the time. The thief is going to be taken to heaven. In other words, the lower cannot go up by itself. It is going to be pulled up by the higher. But first, what did it say? You have to establish an affinity by a neural center to this core of yourself, right? And what are we trying to do? We're trying to change the magnetic aura of your mind, or its affinity to its higher aspect. The polarity has to change so that it gets pulled automatically to the higher and not be obstructed by the elementals in your strategic corners that you have placed. Yes?
I'm going to try to summarize this the way I understand it as I'm sitting here. Nature provides us with our lower characteristics, our personality and all that. And it's there to teach us a lesson, and we are to appreciate that, but not get all sucked up in it. We're here to use it, to honor it, but to in assuming
elevate
this position,
it.
in assuming this position that we're talking about, raise all that up.
Elevated. Okay, nature does not give you your characteristics. Nature gives you what? Your principles.
Right.
The
principles.
Characteristics
Yeah.
come from how you use it.
Right.
The motive, in our words, is what determines it. Mehmet, did you have another question?
A comment on tied to that, maybe the astrology, even though we don't have all the keys, can also be a tool for you to understand the prominent elementals in one's life, and some person may have more fire elements that that person would work with, some more air, earth, etc. It's all a combination, but another useful tool can be astrology.
But that's for the personal self.
Right.
Under what you are born under, what star system is for the personal self,
Yes.
whereas the inner man is timeless.
Yes.
It's through all time. The ever-present now is what it is concerned about. It does not concern itself with the past or the future. It's where the soul is concerned. There's only the eternal now. So that you need to keep in mind too. But the personality is born under one of those systems, and it does affect all of its function during that period of incarnation. However, it provides opportunities, and it is up to you as to what you do with it.
Right.
In other words, it's not written as to how it is going to come out for you. It's you
determine
yourself
yes.
determine what's going to happen.
And the three gunas can be applied there. As if there's a prominent element in you, you can raise it, and it can reveal gifts that you can share with others in this lifetime. So
yeah, it actually says here, the elemental beings are incorporeal spiritual essences, one class of them, and that class only knows benevolence, kindliness, friendliness, and humbleness. These are the elementals that enable us to express the sattvic quality in us. And the second class, it says, is given direction through the power of action. But the nature which reacts upon the doer brings him selfishness, ambition, greed, envy, jealousy, and the like. That's the rajas quality. The third class of these elemental beings have been worn out by us, just like we wear anything else out, and they are lethargic, inert, and dormant. So they express the indifference and the dark quality, which is tamasic. So we are actually giving them a character. So it is important to understand that our thought impresses itself on these diminutive centers of energy, and as we bombard them with the same impress, it becomes solidified. How do we recognize that solidification in nature? By chemical elements, because the elementals are the souls of those elements, and they combine and recombine, and through that combination and recombination, they bring our physical universe into being. So these elementals are the ones that we are impressing, and they actually constitute not our own sheath, but everything in our universe. So the great law of life, it says here, is to act, to strive for perfection. Therefore, these elementals act because they are life, just like we are. They lack conscience, they lack will, they lack intellect, and they lack ethical perception, but they still act according to what we are impressing on them. Looking at the several kingdoms, we may say that first comes reflex action, then habitual action, then instinctual action, then impulsive, and finally reasoned action. So, having passed through all of the kingdoms at some time or other, in this or prior periods of manifestation, man has within himself all the various classes of action: reflex, habitual, instinctual, impulsive, and reason. So, as we now find ourselves, our acts are those connected with the lower kingdoms, but the governing action should be, and must eventually be, from the intuitional and intellectual side. How may such action become the usual and so natural in men? By adopting an ethical basis as a platform for setting up causation. In other words, what did Mr. Judd say? If it doesn't go towards friendship, if it doesn't go towards beneficence, if it doesn't go towards benefiting at this one other person, then don't do the action at all, because you are doing it for yourself. In other words, it's self-centered. So when we adopt this ethical basis for causation, we come into conscious realization of the oneness of life and become a beneficent force in nature. What have we done? We have joined the nature's plan, in other words, for development of humanity and all of the other kingdoms on it. And so we move into this position of being beneficent for everything that we touch and come into contact with. It's important to understand what it is that we are doing to these elemental lives and try to be beneficent and be mindful as to what it is that we're thinking, because negative thoughts obviously attract them. Mr. Judge has an article called Skins of Earth, and in that article he is inside the center of the earth. It's a story, but it tells you that these diminutive beings, through their action, obviously, of earth, which are gnomes, are actually the ones that keep earth revolving on its axis and also around the sun. And he describes a scene where a cloud, black cloud, comes amongst them, and it's interfering with their action by kind of suppressing the light energy that they express. And that at the end of the article, in his mind, the question, he was with a beneficent adept, or I don't know who it would be he was with, but the person does not talk but simply telepathically communicates with him in the story. And at the end, in the writer's mind, the question arises as to what is causing this interference in these diminutive lives. And he says the beneficent person had already departed, but on the wall it said, the thoughts of men, the thoughts of men. So what we think has tremendous importance. So if you have no other questions, then thank you for coming. Next week's talk is, what is the atom? And today we have a roundtable discussion of the Gita, and then our session starts in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, the Gita.